I remember when I was first coaching at Sheffield Wednesday with the first team, Newcastle were top of the championship. We were bottom of the championship. We had to play them. We drew 2-2. They were going up. They brought 10, 12,000 fans to Hillsborough, and their support was fantastic. When they went into the Premier League, they couldn't wait to come back down again.
Well, Sean, for those that don't know, you were an assistant in MLS for both Orlando City and Minnesota United, and had a chance to be the interim coach after Adrian Heath left Minnesota last season, or excuse me, a season and a half ago before you took over Indy 11. What did you learn about the American game during that time? And maybe what are the differences that you've seen between MLS and USL, and if that gap is closing like we all think it is?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jimmy, because I came across here and played for a season with Portland Timbers in 2002. Then I went back to the UK and got into coaching. I was a player coach to start with, then I went into coaching the pros in 2003, really. At 2002, I thought the gap was pretty close between MLS and the USL. Mm-hmm. I thought it was pretty close. It was, and maybe that was due to finances. A lot of the players were getting paid well in the USL at that time. And then in 2012, I came back across to coach with the Timbers, and I was there for six and a half years. And I felt the gap was a lot wider than what it was when I was playing. Now, sort of having the last 11 years in the MLS and coming here, I'm seeing a lot of quality in the USL. And I will say this, I think there's quality in the USL 1 as well. And I think that's probably down to the fact that MLS Next Pro is producing players. And everybody's sort of now getting a better program at a younger age group, or there's more opportunities at younger age groups. So we're creating more players, and these players are finding their way into the USL. You look at the draft and the combine. I know is a little bit modified now, but if you look at the players that are coming out of the draft, a lot of them are internationals. So the ones that don't get taken because the international roster spots in the MLS are dropping into the USL, and they're good players. And I feel as though the standard is improving. I would say, on an honest opinion, it's difficult for the USL to catch the MLS because the MLS is not getting worse.
Right. So what about the American player?
The American players, yeah. I've always, had a lot of respect for the American player, and now what I see is a lot of them getting more opportunities than what they've had in the past. I mean, because you went across to Europe and you got your opportunity. The European players have always been treated with a lot more respect than what probably the American player has, and I don't know why. And I think now that there's been a lot of people that have travelled across from a younger age group, and everybody's gone, oh, well, there's players there. I think there's always been players here. It's just now they're probably getting more opportunity, and that's credit to all the work that's done from all the coaches, all the clubs, everybody, across the board. But that's not new work. That's been done all along. It's just more opportunities now are getting towards these young players.
Sean, talk about the challenges of building this roster, right? You've got guys that, I remember covering Elliot Collier in Chicago for a couple of years. You got all the way down to Aiden Stanley, who was a youth national team standout at so many different levels, has played in the league. Cam Lindley, who was so important for you last night. That in this league, you got to kind of find them from everywhere, and hopefully for you guys, you've been able to really draw some really good players into that club.
Yeah, we've been fortunate to get the players that we've got, and I do feel for some of the players like you've mentioned there, for Elliot, for Aiden Stanley, Cam especially. Them three have been in the MLS, and if it wasn't for situations regarding a salary cap or a roster spot, they probably could still be in the MLS. They might not get as much playing time as the others, but they're good enough to be part of a squad in the MLS, and a number of other players that we've got are. And then securing Reece was a big thing for us because, you get, and again, I go back to, you've got to fish in every single pond regarding recruitment. We took Reece and he'd not been playing, but I've got quite a few contacts back in the UK. I knew what his character was like, and going from like non-league where it's lower division football, but I knew he'd played international football. I knew what his character was, and I knew he would come in and be a really good addition to us. And people like that are worth the weight in gold to you because they're really, really desperate for the opportunity, and they're happy to play a part in the squad. So that was a good one for us. And then the guy who scored the goal last night, And it must mean our name's on the cup, by the way, because I had him since he was 16 at Sheffield Wednesday, and I never saw that in him. So I don't know where that came from, because I've not taught him. Obviously, straight from the training ground, we decided the other 13 corners we weren't going to do anything. It was the 14th one that we were going to put the ball in.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the fact that I've known him since he was a kid, really. And he moved home from London to come and live in Sheffield. And I didn't spend much time with him, because then I got to move to Portland in 2012. So to see him grow and mature, and I kept an eye on him, kept in touch with him, and now he's here with his family. I feel as though that's a really big part of it as well, that, we can offer good opportunities for all players at all levels.
I got two questions for you. The first one, I don't know if you're aware of this MLS Next. We talked about youth players, and I know you've seen a fair share of youth both in England and here. This quality of play ranking that they're doing for the U13 and 14 level. Where do you sit on that idea? Is this progress? Is this we need to keep the competitive spirit? Because I've had a few MLS coaches text me and say, "This is killing the game."
Give us names.
What's going on here, Charlie? Save us! Don't let them ruin the game. So where do you see the benefits, or are there any benefits, and do you agree with it? And I'll ask my question after the next question after this.
You know what it is, Charlie? My biggest thing when I was in youth development was you can't put a time on development, and by saying that you're only doing this at a certain age group, then who's to say that the under 13 who's underdeveloped can't do the style of play that you want to do? And then you rule him out because he doesn't meet the needs of some computer that is generating a score based on how you play at that age group. So you can't really put a time on development. So I don't really know why it's done just there. And then in terms of whether it's right, you'd have to see it working. My opinion is it just a company, a data company that we're partnering with to get information if we're employing the right people with the right qualifications and the right age group specialist, is their eye not better to be able to push them through to the next level and create a player of value? And that's my big thing in youth development. You've got to create a player of value, and that's the value to the club. You can get them in your first team, which then can be on maybe a salary that's relevant to that position. And then they're also a player of value because they stop you from signing somebody else for money. And then they're a player of value because you might sell them. And regarding the development under 13s and 14s and having a style of play, I was a big believer when I was at Sheffield Wednesday that you have to teach every single style of player for a youth player, because you don't know where the game's going in 10 years' time.
100%.
Who would have thought that? People now are talking. That the goal kicks are not as not. Everybody wanted to play a short goal kick. Now people are looking at it and going, "Why are we playing short goal kicks?" And it'll change, and everything will change. So you have to develop a young player with every single style of play to meet the needs of professional football, because the likelihood is the player in your club might play for somebody else.
And depending on a score, you might have to change the style of play, right? Forget the opponent. We're down. Hey, direct, 100%. Right? Yeah. forget these tiki-taka in our own 18-yard box. My next question is something we talked about earlier in the show, was a club like Indy 11. The country's massive. There are a lot of unearthed gems in this country in terms of players, quality of players that slip through the cracks. What's your scouting system like? How do you try and identify those players? Do you have the capability to find players maybe that are lost across this country? I
think it's difficult for us because we can only really spread our net through our academy, which is like an affiliate academy. We're really pleased with what we've got. We've got good people in place in that area of the development of the club, really. And we have to rely on what we produce in our own state. We've got quite a good coverage of the state. In terms of opening the borders, I think that would be a good thing for the top clubs, because as long as there is appropriate investment to make these 12, 13, 14-year-old kids travel across without the parents to live in residential, I can see that coming in like it's done in Europe. But opening the borders would be something that I would be comfortable with, because I think it would improve youth development, because you're going to have to invest more money in making sure that there is no area that's untapped. And for us, it's really important that we develop our own, and it's going back a little bit to your previous question, to the way we want them to play for Indy 11, because we can't probably go and get the best talent from a different state and move them here. And, you know, it's important that when we do make a decision on a 14, 15, 16-year-old player, we get them into the first team environment. We teach them the basic principles of being a professional footballer. And, you know, hopefully that goes on board, and we'll just keep an eye on what we've got locally.
They'd have to have enough
Sean,
green dots, though. You know.
Well, that's true. Lots of green dots. We need a lot of green dots. Quality of play is very important. Sean, last question before we let you go, and good luck again against the Philadelphia Union, May 6th or 7th, whenever you play them in the next round of the Open Cup. Promotion relegation has been introduced now to USL. And obviously you grew up in a system that had promotion relegation. It's in your DNA. How impactful do you think it can be here in the States with the USL being the framework to make it happen?
I think it can be very impactful. I have questions on it, just from probably the same as you guys, but my experience of promotion relegation, I've been promoted once, and I've been relegated twice as a player and relegated once as a coach. And it's tough. People lose their jobs. But what would like the country to embrace is relegation is not a bad thing. And until you've lived through it, and I'd ask you the question is do you think Southampton supporters are looking forward to next season? And the answer to me would be yes. You know, I remember when I was first coaching at Sheffield Wednesday with the first team, Newcastle were top of the championship. We were bottom of the championship. We had to play them with 2-2. They were going up. They brought 10, 12,000 fans to Hillsborough, and their support was fantastic. When they went into the Premier League, they couldn't wait to come back down again. There was all this ownership problem, but they wanted to see the team winning games. So if we can look at promotion and relegation as part of the game and don't and safeguard the clubs that if they get relegated, they can still be here and still be alive, then I think it might be a good thing.
It's not a good thing for the wages, I could tell you that, for the players.
Yeah, exactly. You've been through it, and that's where we've got a safeguard for, you know, the players can get another club and another job. Back home, it was the tea lady who's on the least amount of money loses her job. You're the kit man who works more hours than everybody else gets a wage reduction. And I think we've got to make sure that we've got safeguarding in place for all the clubs, that if you get relegated, then, you know, you've still got to survive. You've still got to be alive. And I don't know whether that comes from a bond that you have to pay when you come into the promotion relegation system, you know. And then also you look at Luton Town now, and I'm talking about relegation being a good thing for some clubs. Relegation's been a nightmare for them, and they might go down again. Now, what they've had to do when they got promoted, they've had to make their stadium, you know, the same standards as Premier League standards. So they've had to spend all that money on the stadium, and next year they might be playing in League One. You know, it's a really tough situation, but that club will still survive and it'll still be alive. And that's where my view on promotion relegation in the US is: make sure we embrace it and safeguard all the clubs that are coming into it, and don't just, you know, move a franchise because it's got relegated and move the club somewhere else. Because it's not fair on all our supporters. We've got fantastic support group, like support section, and all our season ticket holders. I would hate to see that if we got relegated, you know, it's up sticks and move the club somewhere else.